At some point in the last week, you probably cried, or came, close to it. Maybe something sad happened. Maybe something beautiful happened. Maybe nothing happened at all and a song came on and something in your chest just opened up and the tears came before you even understood why. And here is the thing about that moment that nobody ever tells you. Every other mammal on this planet, the dogs, the elephants, the chimpanzees, the wolves, they all feel pain. They all feel fear. They all experience loss. A mother elephant will stand over her dead calf for days. A dog separated from its owner will whimper and pace and stop eating. These are real emotional responses. Nobody serious disputes that. But not one of them produces tears because of those feelings. Not one. Emotional crying, the kind where something happens inside you and liquid comes out of your eyes as a response to that something, appears to be the exclusive behavior of exactly one species on this entire planet, you, and the question of why, of how one primate ended up with this specific, strange, physiologically expensive response to emotional experience that no other animal developed is one of the most genuinely puzzling unsolved questions in evolutionary biology. Today we are going to go as deep into that question as the science currently allows, and what we find on the way down is going to change how you think about the next time it happens to you. Let us start by being precise about what we are actually talking about, because humans produce three different kinds of tears, and only one of them is the mystery. The first kind is basal tears. These are the tears your eyes produce, constantly around the clock, whether you are happy or sad, or completely emotionally neutral, because your eyes are biological surfaces that need continuous lubrication to function. Without basal tears, you would go blind within hours. Every mammal with eyes produces these. There is nothing unusual about them. The second kind is reflex tears. These are produced when something irritates your eye. Smoke, dust, a cut onion, a very bright light, and they exist to flush the irritant out before it can damage the surface of the eye. Again, every mammal with eyes produces these too. Your dog tears up when it walks through smoke. This is not emotion. This is plumbing. The third kind is the one that is unique to humans. They are called emotional or psychic tears. They are produced not by physical irritation of the eye, but by psychological and emotional states: grief, joy, frustration, awe, overwhelming, beauty, helplessness, gratitude. They are chemically different from the other two types, containing higher concentrations of certain proteins, hormones, and neurotransmitters, including prolactin, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and leucine enkephalin, which is a natural painkiller. They are produced by a different neural pathway than reflex tears, and as far as current research can determine, no other animal produces them in response to an emotional states. The question is not why humans cry in the mechanical sense. The lacrimal system, the tear-producing infrastructure, is shared across mammals. The question is why human emotional states got wired into that system in a way that no other animal's emotional states apparently did. And the honest answer, which is uncomfortable for a field that likes definitive answers, is that we do not fully know. But we have some very good theories, and they reveal something remarkable about the specific social pressures that shaped human evolution. The most widely supported theory starts with a concept that comes up over and over in the evolution of human behavior. Honest signaling. In any social species, individuals constantly need to communicate information to each other. Information about their internal states, their needs, their intentions, their vulnerabilities. But communication can be faked. A dominant animal can fake confidence it does not feel. A subordinate can fake submission it does not mean. The problem with signals that can be faked is that they eventually lose their value, because if a signal can be produced dishonestly, receivers learn to discount it. The signals that retain value over evolutionary time are the ones that are difficult or impossible to fake, the ones that are costly to produce in some way that makes dishonest production unlikely. Emotional tears appear to be exactly this kind of signal. You cannot easily cry on demand. Actors spend years learning to produce genuine-looking emotional tears, and most of them cannot do it reliably without specific techniques. The involuntary nature of Emotional crying, the fact that it is triggered by the autonomic nervous system rather than by conscious decision, is precisely what makes it a reliable, honest signal. When you see someone crying, you are seeing something their body is doing without their full permission. That involuntariness is the signal's credibility. But a signal is only useful if someone is receiving it. And this is where the social architecture of human evolution becomes critical. Humans evolved in small, tightly interdependent groups where your survival depended directly on the support, cooperation, and goodwill of the people around you. In that context, the ability to communicate genuine emotional distress to signal convincingly that you are suffering and need help was not a luxury. It was a survival tool. A member of the group who was injured, grieving, overwhelmed, or in crisis needed the rest of the group to know about it and respond. And the more convincingly and unmistakably that distress could be communicated, the more likely the response would be adequate. Emotional tears, visible from a distance, produced involuntarily, immediately recognizable as a signal of genuine internal distress, may have been selected for precisely because they were the most efficient, most credible, most impossible to fake distress signal available to a social species that needed its distress to be believed. This theory gets interesting support from what we know about the chemistry of emotional tears. The leucine and enkephalin, found in emotional tears but not in reflex tears, is a natural opioid painkiller. People consistently report feeling better after crying, even when nothing about their situation has actually changed. The physical act of crying appears to have a genuine physiological calming effect, reducing stress hormone levels and activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, that counteracts the stress response. This suggests that the emotional crying is not just a signal sent outward to other people, it is also a signal sent inward, a self-regulation mechanism that the body uses to process and discharge intense emotional states that would otherwise remain at physiologically damaging levels. You cry not just to tell others you are suffering. You cry to help yourself stop suffering. The same behavior is doing two jobs simultaneously: external communication and internal regulation, which is exactly the kind of multifunction efficiency that evolution tends to favor and preserve. Now here is the part that gets genuinely strange. If emotional tears are such a useful, honest signal, why did only humans develop them? Other social mammals, particularly the great apes who share almost our entire genetic code, also live in groups, also experience genuine emotional distress, also need to communicate that distress to group members. Why did they not develop the same signal? The most compelling answer involves something that is unique to human social evolution, and that changed the nature of what a distress signal needed to accomplish. Humans are the only species that formed large cooperative groups with strangers. Chimpanzees live in groups too, but those groups are small, and every member knows every other member personally. Emotional communication in a small group of relatives and long-term companions does not need to travel very far or work very hard. A whimper, a facial expression, a postural change, these are sufficient when you are communicating with 10 individuals who know you well and have strong personal reasons to care about your welfare. But as human groups grew larger, and as the cooperative web that humans built expanded to include individuals who were not relatives, not long-term companions, not people, with a personal stake in your survival, the demands on distress signaling changed. You needed a signal that worked on strangers, a signal that could generate sympathy and cooperative response from someone who had no prior relationship with you and no existing personal reason to care. And tears, it turns out, are remarkably effective at this. Studies have shown that viewing images of faces with tears generates significantly stronger empathic responses in observers than viewing the same faces without tears. Even when facial expression is controlled for, the tear itself, independent of the face it appears on, triggers something in the human observer. A stranger crying is treated differently than a stranger who is clearly distressed but not producing tears. The tear does something to us neurologically that other distress signals do not. And in a species that needed to build cooperation across social distance with strangers and near strangers, that specific capacity to generate empathy in unfamiliar others would have been extraordinarily valuable. There is one more dimension to human crying that has no parallel anywhere else in the animal kingdom, and it is the one that is hardest to explain in purely functional terms. Humans cry at things that are not sad. We cry at beauty, at music, at the end of a film when a character we have never met achieves something we have never wanted, ourselves. We cry at graduations and weddings, events that represent positive outcomes. We cry when we see strangers, be unexpectedly kind to each other. We cry at sunsets. None of this fits neatly into the honest signaling theory, because these are not distress signals. Nobody at a wedding needs help. The person crying at a beautiful piece of music is not communicating suffering to the group. What researchers who study this kind of crying, called awe tears or tears of beauty or tears of being moved, have found is that these responses seem to be triggered by a specific combination, the experience of something much larger than yourself combined with the awareness of human connection. Beauty moves us to tears not despite the fact that it is positive, but because the scale of the feeling exceeds what the normal emotional processing system can contain. The tears are an overflow response. The same autonomic system that handles genuine distress gets activated when the emotional input is simply too large in any direction for the normal processing channels to handle without some kind of physical release. The person crying at a beautiful sunset is not sad. They are having an experience whose intensity exceeds the emotional container, and the body is doing the only thing it knows how to do when that happens. It opens the valve. And that, in the end, is perhaps the deepest thing about human emotional tears. They are not just a distress signal. They are evidence of an emotional system that has been built to experience things at an intensity that sometimes exceeds what a body can hold in silence. No other animal appears to have that problem, which might say something about the size of what other animals feel, or it might say something about the size of what we do. The next time the tears come, before you are embarrassed by them or try to stop them, remember what they actually are. A signal your body has been perfecting for hundreds of thousands of years. The most honest thing you are capable of producing. Evidence that something got in, something real. Something large enough that your body decided the only appropriate response was to let it out through your eyes. That is not weakness. That is the most human thing there is. There is a practical footnote to all of this that is worth sitting with. Humans are the only species that can be moved to tears by fiction, by stories about people who do not exist, events that never happened, losses that nobody actually suffered. A novel can make you cry. A film can make you cry. A song with lyrics about a stranger's heartbreak can produce the same physiological response as genuine personal loss. No other animal does this. A chimpanzee watching another chimpanzee in distress will show empathic responses. But show that same chimpanzee a film about a chimpanzee in distress and nothing happens. The chimpanzee correctly identifies the film as not real and responds accordingly. Humans do not do this. We know the film is not real and we cry anyway. We know the novel's characters never existed and we grieve them anyway. This is sometimes treated as a quirk or an embarrassment, the fact that people cry at movies as if it represents some failure of rational discrimination. But it is actually evidence of something extraordinary. Humans have an empathic system so powerful, so sensitive, and so expansive that it responds to the representation of suffering almost as strongly as to suffering itself. The system that evolved to make you responsive to the genuine distress of real people around you is so finely tuned that it cannot easily distinguish between real pain and a sufficiently vivid representation of pain. And that inability to distinguish, that radical openness to the suffering of others, including fictional others, is arguably the cognitive foundation of human moral development, art, literature, and the entire project of trying to understand experiences other than your own. You cry at movies because you are built to care about people you have never met. That is not a bug in the human emotional system. It is possibly the most important feature it has.